Friday football. A bloody good weekend of footy. Your host tonight, Chris Pepper, the 377-game superstar of the East Keilor Football Club. And if you haven't listened to Lace Out before, all I can say is you are joining the number one club affiliated podcast this side of the West Coast Bridge, brought to you by Ditching the Diet. If you're looking to lose the kilos without losing the flavour, get on to my mate, Baron Grant. He is an absolute star. Like I said, I've lost about 5.5, 6 kilos from this bloke. And if you're looking to shed a few, I would not hesitate to give him a buzz at all. Well, what can I say, ladies and gentlemen? A cracking round of football. Results that we did not see coming, and a couple of results that have got the eyes rolling a little bit. We'll get into them very, very shortly. But I'll be going through the ladder. I'll be going through, obviously, the results over the weekend, giving you my 5-minute synopsis on how it all went, what I thought, what I felt on the games. And then I'm going to bring up a bit of a contentious issue that keeps raising its ugly head time and time again after this particular weekend of football, and it has to do with a certain team who wears blue and white. But I'll get into all that very, very shortly. But I think the first thing that we need to do is get this ladder on the screen, have a bit of a look about it, and let's get through it. All righty, GWS did not play on the weekend and are still sitting on top of the AFL ladder. Flag mantle, get the tattoos out, ladies and gentlemen. They are sitting there on 12 points as well, having a great start to the season. Nobody saw that coming whatsoever. My boys, the D's, had a great win over Jamie, the J-Dogs, Port Adelaide over the weekend. We'll get into that shortly. Geelong, Sydney, and Carlton. So 6 teams, interestingly enough, sitting on 12 points at the moment. One game clear of the Western Bulldogs and Port Adelaide making up the final 8. Essendon, great win on the weekend. No, I don't think many people saw that coming outside of the Essendon supporters, so I would love to hear the feedback from the listeners and the viewers right now, how they went. Gold Coast Suns had the bye. It's probably a good thing because after what they shoved up the week before, they need to lift their game. St Kilda, Collingwood, and Richmond sitting on 4 points. And then you have a group of 5 teams sitting on 0. Brisbane, Adelaide, North Melbourne, Hawthorn, and the West Coast Eagles. And I put something up on our TikTok page a little bit earlier on. Out of Brisbane and the Adelaide Crows, who's had the worst start to season 2024? It's an interesting one because one we're expecting to be premiership favourites and the other one we thought were going to dominate their way into the top 8, and they've done absolutely none of that so far. So there's the ladder. It is still a bit of an anomaly because some teams have played 4 games, some have played 3, some of them haven't even turned up whatsoever, and I'm looking at you, West Coast Eagles. But the ladder looking very interesting. Everybody has joined us, and it is going to be an absolute cracker. So looking forward to it. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get into the games, the results, because I think it's my 5-minute whip around to what I think about the games, what I thought about the results over the weekend. Okay, Brisbane losing to Collingwood. Now, this was a belter of a game, and I thought that Brisbane at home, you got to understand, they did not lose a game last year whatsoever. And for whatever reason, I got no idea what it is. They're saying that there's no splinters in the club. There's no fraction amongst the players. There's nothing going on whatsoever, but they absolutely looked woeful. And that's my favourite word for the last couple of years to describe what they served up. It was absolutely woeful. It was a bit of the Collingwood of old. Interestingly enough, in the second quarter, Brisbane dominated. I think they had 20-plus inside 50s to 2 and could not register a score. They kicked 4 goals, 5 that quarter. Collingwood helped scoreless, and they were only 3 points up at halftime, and they should have taken control. Nick Dacus off the half-back line, look, that's where he's got to play, especially when Collingwood have not been playing great football, and they still weren't at their best, but they had a lot more pressure. Jamie Elliott was absolutely sensational. And Brisbane, well, their forwards just don't fire. There's too much work on Harris Andrews. Their midfield only runs one way, and if they don't pick themselves up very, very shortly, they're going to find that the slipping out of the 8 is not just going to be a travesty. They're not probably even going to get back into it because their next couple of games are absolute horror stories, and we'll get into that very, very shortly. North Melbourne versus Carlton, the Good Friday game. It's not about football, this particular result. It's all about the kids. 47,000 were there. A cracking result for the Good Friday appeal. It is North Melbourne's game. It has to be North Melbourne's game. I'm getting into that a little bit earlier on, based off past history. Carlton were just absolutely awesome. They put them to the sword. It was a pretty good game for the first probably 2.5 quarters, and then just North Melbourne fell away, and Carlton did what they had to do when you got the Twin Towers of Curnow and Mackay down forward, you're going to struggle to beat them at any day of the week. Fremantle defeated Adelaide. This was a soccer score up to halftime. If you went and decided to go do some housework, maybe go clean the toilets, clean the shower, maybe go cook dinner, hey, listen, take the dog for a walk. Anything would have been better than watching Fremantle and Adelaide that first half. It was absolutely pitiful. It was a disgrace. And Fremantle are lucky that they got the win because that was the only good thing to come out of it, except for Luke Jackson being an absolute superstar. And I'll tell you what, it's down to him and Gordon at the moment, who's going to be this all-Australian ruckman. So they're just absolutely dominating it. This is a result that nobody saw coming, including myself. St Kilda losing to Essendon. We talked about the Essendon edge. I said they were blunt. I thought it was all hype, all talk, no action. But, geez, they brought the heat to St Kilda. Not having Max King down there in the forward line made it very, very difficult. Membry didn't fire whatsoever, having to rely on the smalls once again. But the package, it might only happen once every 6 or 7 weeks, but he did deliver. And that long bomb with a couple of minutes to go was absolutely so. Great work. Nick Martin kicking out a fullback again, racked up, I think, 6 or 7 chippies, getting a 44 stats across the board. A great result. But, yeah, Essendon, that was a win that shows a lot of belief, but also shows the limitations of St Kilda once again. It was the Pickett Toompas Cup on Saturday night. My boys beating Port Adelaide. I must admit, I didn't watch a quarter and a half of this. I was absolutely too nervous. Port Adelaide played out of their skin. They should have won this by 3 or 4 goals, but their inaccuracy in front. When you've had 3 more scoring shots, 20-odd inside 50s more, and the stats just blowing the Ds away, this is a result that Melbourne had many times over the previous year, where inaccuracy in front of goal or not being able to convert, they flipped the script, kicked in 15 goals 6 to 13-11, and accuracy in front of goal was what won this game. It was clutch. It was clutched by Fritsch. It was clutched by Gawn. It was clutched by Ben Brown. And the D's set themselves up really nicely heading into Adelaide and Gather Round this week, which we'll get into shortly. Western Bulldogs, they did what they had to do. I thought this margin would have been more. West Coast, they're simply just unwatchable whatsoever. So if you ever want to go to the movies, do something with the husband or the wife or the kids, whatever, the safest time to just do it is whenever West Coast are playing. Nobody watches them, only West Coast supporters and the AFL. They're the only people that watch West Coast. They don't deserve a priority pick. It's been brought up in the media today. Absolutely no chance they should get it. For the simple fact that team won a premiership 6 years ago. Put that in perspective. Richmond defeated Sydney. No one saw this. Once again, unless you're a Richmond supporter or you have no idea about football, there is no reason why Richmond should have won that game and Sydney should have lost it, but it was the result that nobody saw coming. A cracking finish to the way the game played out. Sydney virtually had this in the bag about halfway through the third quarter, and then they just fell away at the seams. And Richmond, what more could you ask for? Adam Uzo getting his first win. So pumped for him and so pumped for Richmond because we need a Richmond team winning, and just brings the reality check back to Sydney as well too. And last but not least, Hawthorn lost to Geelong. Good to see Hawthorn come back in at the second half to get this game a little bit even Stevens, but geez, they were just way too good, Hawthorn. That first quarter was a sight to behold. They were absolutely gorgeous. Loved everything about what they did. The game did have to stop to lightning. Last time I checked, it was a winter sport, so I don't know why we have this lightning rule. You think it's going to hit the towers before it's going to hit the players, so I've got no idea. But Geelong, once again, they're just ticking along nicely. No one believes that they can make the 8. No one believes they can win the flag, but they're playing pretty good football. But the wheels on the bus, will they fall off? I'm not too sure. I'm just excited to hear and see what everybody is thinking as well too. Well, have a look at this. The comments have absolutely been flying through right now. It's great to see buzz online. I'll get into that in a moment. North, they don't have a back line. You could there's the Victorian budget, the Victorian deficit is that big, that could still fly through the North Melbourne backline. It is that bad. The Saints did win. Flag mantle looking absolutely awesome. Surprised Peps hasn't mentioned you here. Can't believe that you lost to that mob. I don't know what happened there, Buzz, but it was very, very disappointing. I thought they would have happened. You're saying limitation with injuries. Wood, Henry King. Yeah, but Essendon, it's Essendon. There was no reason why. Flag mantle again. The umpire thought, look, umpiring across the board hasn't been fantastic at all. And James John is saying that Melbourne missed finals and Port versus Freo grand final. Interesting, James. Great to see you on the channel. Love to have you part of the show. I don't know where we're going to get to that one, but some cracking points brought up, and we'll get into that a little bit more. Okay. There is one thing I wanted to bring up, and I do have a bit of an issue going on at the moment. I want you to picture this, listeners. I want you to picture Anzac Day, the Anzac Day extravaganza that's been going on since the early 90s without Essendon. I want you to picture King's birthday, aka the Queen's birthday game, without Melbourne. I want you to picture the season opener, the traditional game between Carlton and Richmond, and no Carlton whatsoever. And maybe even the Good Friday game, because apparently everybody's saying, hey, you know what? North are crap. And so you know what we should do, everybody? We should boot them from Good Friday because they are an absolute travesty to the competition. It's a waste of a marquee game. And why should they be able to keep it? We should give it to somebody else. And those thoughts are exactly what is wrong with the entire AFL competition right now. When I hear things like that, it's just disappointing to me and it's disappointing to clubs. North Melbourne, you've got to remember, for all of those who are, as young as me in the late 40s, they pioneered Friday night football. They were the reason why Friday night football was something that nobody wanted to play, but they said, we want to make it ours. We want to make it ours and we want to make it our own. And then once Friday night football started to come alive and everybody was drawn to night games, they were simply booted out, and now it's the marquee fixture. Well, based on that, Richmond lost 5 of the 6 season openers. The first 5 of the 6 season openers, Richmond lost. It was a bit of a tongue twister. Do you know Essendon lost 3 of the first 4 Anzac Day games, and they've only won 10 out of the entire 28? Melbourne lost the first 3 King's birthday games, and based on that, North have only won 1 of their Good Friday games. Just because teams are not successful, it does not mean that you have to take that game off them. Who are you going to give it to? Are you going to give it to another marquee club like Collingwood? Are you going to give it to another marquee club like Essendon or Richmond? Or, Carlton took it over from the Western Bulldogs for no reason whatsoever. And you can't do this because teams at the top of the food chain keep getting these games year in, year out. The Minnows need to have their place in the sun as well too, because this game, even though it's in its minutia, even though it's in its infantile type of structure, it will explode. It is more about the kids than the game itself. They had 47,000 there the other night. Yeah, and the result wasn't exactly what we wanted, but North, we know, are going through a rebuild. Carlton didn't do anything for almost 10 straight years against Richmond, but for no reason we were going to kick them off. Those results have been worse than the North Melbourne ones. Melbourne were crap against Collingwood for many, many, many years on Queen's birthday, but they still kept it. Essendon, they were great for a number of years and then they would fall away. And the same thing happens throughout the secular nature of football. Teams are going to have their periods where they are dominating, and then they're going to have their periods where they are falling apart, and they're just terribly no good. And that is why you can't kick North Melbourne out. Because I can tell you now, North Melbourne, in a number of years, will be sitting towards the top of the ladder, and there is going to be a time when Carlton are crap again, and then we're going to say, do we kick Carlton off? So North Melbourne deserve that game. If Essendon have only won 10 out of the 28 Queen's birthday games, why should they keep it? Well, because they started the tradition, and they should be able to keep it day in, day out, year after year, and build it into something bigger and bigger and bigger every single year. Now, if I'm wrong, let me know. Tell me in the chat. Tell me in the comments on the Facebook page. I want to hear. But I'm telling you now, you have to give these clubs a chance to make it grow. Because, as they say, from little things, great things grow, big things grow, and Good Friday football is something that is going to grow into something that everybody is absolutely going to love. All right. Couple of the questions coming through that I have to write. North and Carlton. Bo Hawkins has got a great comment here. The North Melbourne and Carlton are the right choice. The Children's Hospital sits between both. And I really do agree with that. I think that is an absolute cracker-dacker of a suggestion as well too. So they sit nicely between both areas. The kids love them. Carlton are flying a little bit. North aren't. And that's okay. All right. So I think just at the moment in time, we'll keep it with those particular two as well too. I must admit, Fev's kick around the corner was a bit of a nice one too, Bo. He loves a bit of Boonana action, and it was absolutely gorgeous to see that one roll around as well too. He's also, geez, you're on fire tonight, Bo. North pushed for Good Friday with Carlton. The AFL tried the Saints and the Bulldogs. The fit wasn't right. It's with Carlton. And the kids is the right place. As the kids go and they aren't, well, in case the weather being putrid, they can always look after them. They can go under the dome as well. So I do agree it has to be part of the vernacular, that they are part of the show every single week. All right. Couple of things coming through on the chat, which I wanted to bring it up. All right. So one of the questions that came up is, and Buzz brought this up. We know Buzz loves his Saints, but he was saying that limitation due to injuries. Would Henry King in one hit doesn't help. And I understand that. But I just looked at the way that Essendon played on the weekend. I have to give them credit for their hardness at the ball. Now, I know they've been talking about this Essendon edge, and they did get it a little bit rough over those first couple of weeks. But what they showed last week was probably what a lot of Essendon supporters have been sitting back going, thank you. Where have you been? Where have you been? Because we wanted to see more of it. And I agree wholeheartedly. That's what we want to see from an Essendon football club. Hey, I've had my fair share over the year of giving them a whack around the ears. Everybody, all the Essendon supporters know that because they have been crap. Let's be honest. They haven't won a final since I think my kids were born. There's kids who are 21, 22 years of age who have never seen a finals win from Essendon. And they still brag that they're, the baby bombers. Well, mate, that's 31 years ago. Time to get over that. You've done nothing since then. Oh, actually, sorry, you did win a 2000 flag. I'll take that back. But you've done nothing since then. And so that's why we can say that, well, you're all talk, no action. And so when the edge came into play, it was just another bit of this and nothing to be seen. And there's a famous quote when they say, when all is said and done, more is usually said than done. But it was finally good to see Essendon do more than say on the weekend and take the Saints out. Now, does that hide some holes for the Saints? I don't think so. I think they're looking all right, but I think that they don't have as much depth as we would think that they have. And when you lose King, Wood, and Henry in the space of a week, that's a lot of holes to fill. And I think there's some other clubs that probably have a little bit more depth in those areas. So I think the Saints need to have their best 22 on the park for them to contend in that top 8 range. If they don't, and they're going to run into strong teams, I think that they are going to find it very challenging to win those games. Now, I'm not saying that they're not going to win, but probably teams in that same range, they definitely will. But teams towards the top 4 and above, they're the ones that I think that they're going to struggle if they're not at 100%. Not every team's like that. Teams like the Giants, teams like Sydney, teams like Melbourne. Melbourne didn't have May last weekend, and that was a big hole, probably the biggest hole in their club outside of Gawn, and they're still able to find a way to win. It is going to be challenging for them. But hey, 1 week doesn't make a season, and I think it is. There's still a massive chance to play it. So once again, I'm not super in depth. I don't get deep down for the stats. If you want to go and check out stats, there's plenty of other channels you can go to. But yes, you've got injuries, and I do find it challenging. I do like this one, Buzz, and I can't wait to see this one that you will beat your mob, the D's. You know what? Let's just see what happens on the day. It'll be a cracking game. I might even go with you, Buzz, just so we can sit and just take the piss out of each other, because I know I'd love that and you'd love that too as well, going back to the old EK days as well. But yeah, it'd be a great game. Melbourne, St Kilda, always a cracking one as well too. Okay. Rightio. Umpiring, ladies and gentlemen. What's your thoughts on the umpiring so far this year? Yeah. Silence? That's pretty much mine as well too. I don't know when umpires decided that it was their choice not to award free kicks or award out of bounds or not even award goals. Would you say it was the Ben Keys moment last year against Sydney that has caused this massive shift in the way it's been going? My mate Heathy Buxton, a few people in the chat know him. He's an absolute legend of a bloke. And the one thing he keeps saying is that we are the worst officiated league in the world, at least for sport. And I think, well, I can see where he's coming from. It's not an easy sport. You've got a ball that's oval. It's a 360-degree game. It's not like rugby where it's, up and back. That's it. It literally is up and back. It's not like soccer, which is literally up and back. It is a ball bouncing in all different degrees. You can tackle, marks ball, etc. But I think what's occurred is a couple of key factors. The first is it's the AFL's fault, because what the AFL did was that they decided to bring in all these interpretations instead of making something black and white. And so as soon as you bring in interpretations, the way that I look at something and the way that you look at something could be completely different. And so, I have to make the decision based on what I think, not what the rule says. And the deliberate out of bounds is a perfect example of that. When you keep hearing week after week, insufficient intent. Well, you don't know what my intent is. And I saw some rippers on the weekend. I don't know if anybody saw, if anyone saw the Hawthorn Geelong game, but the number of kicks, especially in the second half after the rain came down, that were just long kicks out of packs, skidding along. There's no breaks. The grass is slippery. The ball's just going to roll out. The umpires have almost lost the feel for the game. They don't know, okay, well, it's raining. It's slippery. It's no good. Like it's out. It doesn't sit right. When you watch it, you go, yeah, you got to feel for the game. So it's almost like they've taken the way that the rule is written up too stringently. The out of bounds at the moment, I don't think I can remember in 4 rounds of footy. You've got to remember we've played 3, but there was that round 0 that's just thrown everybody out. It's not the daylight savings of the AFL fixture. When they introduced that, in 4 rounds so far this year, I cannot remember the sheer number of stuff-ups from boundary umpires. Now, I don't know if it's just me, but do you agree? I haven't seen. I see Snags Higgins, his goal he kicked a couple of weeks ago. Don't get me wrong, it was an absolutely gorgeous snag, but he was like half a metre across the line when he kicked it. There was one in the Melbourne-Port Adelaide game on the weekend when Willie Rioli took a mark. He juggled it over the line. It was a good 2 feet out, and there was an umpire who was the boundary sitting on one side looking at it, and then there was a field umpire on the other side, was almost waiting for the boundary to pay it, and when he didn't pay it, it was like, well, I have to pay it as a mark, and he paid it as a mark. And the number of goals that we're seeing that are not being paid automatically by goal umpires because they're too nervous, and I think it does come back to this Ben Key situation from last year. Goal umpires are just scared to make a decision. Some of them are clearing it by a clear foot. It is getting out of control. If it goes through the middle of the goals and you're not sure, just call it a goal. They review it anyway, and if it's wrong, it'll come back to the middle. I don't understand why we're doing that. I can understand if it comes off the side of the post, etc. But when it's going through the goals and they're not sure if it is a goal, just call it a goal and goes through. Funny enough, Jack Ginnivan. Another thing that I'll bring up is the Jack Ginnivan. I honestly believe that they are umpiring him differently to everybody else at the moment. And you could say that I'm wrong. I totally get that. But I just saw some circumstances on the weekend where he had his head ripped off and they weren't paid. Now, I think the action of raising the arm up to get the tackle up higher, that's his detriment. And he did a lot of that when he first played and he was playing for free kicks. And now he's unfortunately created a rod for his own back, and that's what's caused it. So I think the AFL definitely have to look and come out and say yes or no. I'm not too sure. But there is something definitely there that he's being adjudicated a little bit differently than everybody else. Okay. Now, a lot of chat has been coming in on the chat, no pun intended, about, and this is some of the things. It's like, Peps, why don't you mention who's in charge of the umpiring department? Okay. So there's a head of umpiring and then there's a head of football. Okay. Now, Laura Keane is the head of football. Now, I'm not trying to make this into a sexist man versus woman, anything along those lines. But they have to come out and say something about the quality of what's been going on. And I think that we're very critical of the players, but we haven't been very critical of the umpires themselves. I think other sports generally say how it is. Yeah, Laura Keane is the name. Thanks again, Buzz. And I think she needs to come out, and I think she stuffed up a little bit in round one when I've gone like Hewitt and Lockie Neal punched each other in round one. And when she tried to explain that was a fending off action and it wasn't, and it was around the ball, I think everybody sat back and went, I'm sorry, that's a punch. And now what's happened is all these little snipey, jumpy punches that we've been getting over the last number of weeks can't get rubbed out because we set the rod for our own back, or the AFL did. Laura Keane did it at the start of the season by not paying that particular part. And it's wrong. And that's where I start to think, well, they got a real feel for the game. And I don't think that they do. And I think there's way too many rules in there right now that people just don't understand anymore. I remember, am I right or am I wrong here, listeners? Tell me, am I right? Viewers are sitting here right now going, I'm an idiot. Some of them are saying I'm right. That's great. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, and that's what I'm looking at. But what concerns me more than anything is that on the weekend, there was a game where a team had 70, I think it might have been Geelong the week before, this weekend. They had 70-odd tackles, and not one was given a holding the ball. Now, I don't know what holding the ball is anymore. I've seen some throws. I've seen people try and break 3 tackles. They'll try and fend off. They'll take extra steps. They'll go to ground. They make no attempt to get the ball out, and the umpire just goes, straight, give it to me. And no wonder why supporters are getting frustrated. No wonder why players are getting frustrated, because then out of the blue one gets called and nobody's got an idea why. So how do we do this? What do we do? How do we get it back to a place where it's easily understandable how umpiring decisions can be made, but the rules can be made clearer? And I think it's quite simple. We've just got to take the interpretation out of it. You have to take the interpretation out of it. You need the umpires talking and having a relationship with the players. They need to be able to, if somebody asks, why didn't you pay that? The umpire needs to give a response. Why? You've got to build that connection. I think the drama also is this prior opportunity makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. When did it ever become that if you get tackled, it's okay just to hold the ball to yourself? Or if you get tackled to the ground, you can just not make any attempt to get it out? It seems to be that's the way of the world these days. It's almost as bad, if anyone watches the NBA, how bad the officiating on the travel has got. It's like you can see people doing double dribbles, 2 steps, do-si-dos, alley-oops, etc. And then they pay one completely out of the blue, and you're going, and they'll do it at the wrong time. It's the same thing here as there. Okay. Buzz has got an interesting one here. You've got to get men to umpire, not soft socks who hear a roar and then pay a free kick. Yeah, I think there's some merit to that, especially for the Adelaide and WA-based teams. They have a very parochial supporter base, and it's very, very influential over there. But I will say this. It is very, very difficult. Hands in the back. The easiest thing to do is you put hands in a person's back. It's hands in the back. Use the old forearm like you used to have to. It's as simple as that. If you get tackled, you've got to dispose of the ball. Not making an attempt. If you get caught, and you don't dispose of it correctly, that's dropping the ball. It was like that for many, many years, and now they've got to make an attempt, and that's what's muddied the waters quite a fair bit. I could go on for hours about this stuff, and I bring it up with J-Dog every single week. He brings it up, I bring it up, and it's almost become a broken record. Umpiring. And I do not know what we need to do, and I don't think there is a way that we can make it simple for everybody. I think what we need to do is simplify a lot of the rules as well. Also, great one came up on the weekend where players inside 50, they should be able to move if they're on the mark. If the mark is set inside 50, they should be able to put the player off. Because now we're seeing players taking off and running, and the umpire's not quick enough to call play on, and the players are standing there and cannot even make an opportunity to go ahead and tackle them. It's not flash as well too. So there are rules that need to be scrapped. There are rules that need to be totally taking out grey areas. It's black or white. Do you remember the sliding rule where that was brought in because of the Lindsay Thomas, Gary Rowan situation? Now you've got players who are going for the ball. The other player falls on top of them and they're getting a free kick, even though the person's got their hands on the ball first. So I think these rules need to be re-evaluated, and I know a lot of it has to do with concussions, medical, legal side of things, which is totally out of my pay grade. But we are losing people to the game because of the ridiculousness. And when the commentators are coming out with a lot more of that information now and saying a lot more of these things, you can see it's just growing into something more than we thought too. So I think there's definitely something there that we can talk about as well too. All right. So that's it so far. So we've spoken about the footy, Good Friday footy. We've spoken about the umpires. We've had a chat about the results from this weekend. My impression is I think footy's in a good spot at the moment. We just need to get over these buys that are happening over the next couple of weeks. Gather round is going to be an absolute corker this week. Really looking forward to it. The tips I've already placed up on the YouTube channel, and they will be on the podcast shortly. So if you want to check out my tips for Gather Round, I've got 2 upsets that I think are going to occur. It's going to be massive. How good is Jake Lever? Love Jake Lever, Bo Hawkins. Did have a great night the other night, but he needs to have his big man, Stephen May, down there. He's going to save a lot, but he's going to give away a bit as well, too. So you've got to have a bit of flexibility with that as well. So there, that's the way that things are looking, too. So I'm almost ready to wrap this one up. I know it's a bit of there was one less game on the weekend. GWS and Gold Coast weren't there. So there was one game less, but if you want to have a look at who I think is going to win this week in terms of 1 weekend at a time or 1 week at a time, if you give me a moment, I'll tell you who I think is going to take out, or the games that I'm really excited for in 2024's Gather Round. Just give me a moment and I'll load these games up. All right. I'm definitely looking forward to Melbourne and Adelaide. Will Adelaide be able to do anything? I'm not too sure they can. Port Adelaide and Essendon at the Adelaide Oval, 7:40 p.m. That could be one of the upsets that I have predicted. If Essendon bring the edge and Port Adelaide play like they did last week in front of goal, they could get a bit of a rude awakening. Also, definitely looking at Freo and Carlton. 2 teams, one we expected to do really, really well. Fremantle Dockers, we thought were going to be towards the bottom end of the ladder, and they're 3-0 at the moment on neutral ground at the Adelaide Oval. 3:50 p.m. in the afternoon is a cracker of a game. I'm really looking forward to that. Gold Coast GWS at the Adelaide Hills, I think, is going to be very, very interesting as well. I've actually tipped Gold Coast to beat the Giants. Don't know why, but there's just something I think that Gold Coast need to flex their muscle, and GWS, you'd expect them to win. So putting that into perspective, that's probably the one that they'll lose. And I reckon one of the games of the weekend, there's another couple here as well. Western Bulldogs versus the Cats. That's going to be a corker. But I'm really excited to see Richmond versus St Kilda. Now, I've actually gone gone with St Kilda for that game. The reason why simply is because when you lose Lynch, when you've lost Noah Bolter, it's going to be very, very hard to kick and stop a score. I think even with a couple of outs that St Kilda have, they should get across the line. But stranger things have happened, and everything is going to be happening all in the state of South Australia because Gather Round will be kicking off this weekend as well too. All right, so there it is, everybody. It's a bit of a shortened episode. Like I said, the great man has been Crook. He'll be back next week. Really excited for it. For everybody who's joined us on the chat, it's been absolutely sensational tonight. You've been flying in. Everybody who's joining us on the podcast, thank you very much for listening once again. If you haven't done so, jump onto our Facebook page, jump onto our YouTube page, like, subscribe, ring the bell, make sure that you get the best content because it's laced out to tell you what your footy. I'm your host, Chris Pepper. J-Dog will be back next week. Have a great gather round. Enjoy yourselves, gamble responsibly, and more importantly, I hope your team wins. Thanks for listening.